In 2016, what was supposed to be a fun trip to Bottling Wildlife Park in Beijing turned into an absolute nightmare for a Chinese family. A routine visit to the popular safari park ended in tragedy when Mrs. Xiao was killed by a tiger while trying to save her daughter, Mei. The horrifying attack played out right in front of their loved ones, serving as a chilling reminder of what happens when people get too close to wild animals. It all started with a heated argument inside their car. Frustrated and upset, Mei made a split-second decision that would change everything. She stepped out of the vehicle in a restricted area. Within seconds, a Siberian tiger lurking nearby pounced, clamping its powerful jaws around her and dragging her toward the underbrush. The attack was so fast that her family barely had time to react. Without a second thought, Mrs. Xiao jumped out of the car to save her daughter. She ran toward the tiger, desperately trying to fight it off. But before she could free Mei, another tiger appeared, and this time, it went after her. Mrs. Xiao was mauled to death, sacrificing herself to protect her child. Mei survived but suffered severe life-changing injuries. The entire terrifying incident was caught on CCTV, and the footage is just as horrifying as you'd imagine. Park staff rushed to the scene in vehicles, but by the time they arrived, it was too late to save Mrs. Xiao. Her death left her family devastated and sent shockwaves through the public. The tragedy quickly sparked a debate about safety at wildlife parks. Many questioned why such a dangerous area didn't have more barriers or emergency measures to keep visitors from leaving their cars. Others pointed out that the park had clear rules and warning signs, rules that Mei ignored, ultimately setting off the tragic chain of events. The backlash didn't stop there. Mei faced harsh criticism from the public, with some blaming her for not only putting herself in danger, but also costing her mother's life. It was a brutal reaction to someone who had just survived a nightmare and lost a parent. In response to the tragedy, Bottling Wildlife Park temporarily shut down to review its safety measures, but after an investigation, officials found no wrongdoing at the park's part. Despite this, the family took legal action. Though it didn't change the heartbreaking reality, this could have been avoided if the rules had been followed. When the park eventually reopened, it reinforced strict safety guidelines, making it crystal clear that visitors must stay inside their vehicles at all times. While some saw it as a necessary step, for others, it was just a painful reminder of the terrible price one family had paid. Mrs. Xiao's actions were nothing short of heroic, but her tragic death is a stark lesson in the dangers of underestimating wild animals. Safari parks offer a rare chance to see these creatures up close, but they also demand deep respect for their power and unpredictability. This heartbreaking story remains a cautionary tale about the risks of ignoring boundaries, both literal and metaphorical. For Mrs. Xiao's family, the loss is deeply personal, but for the rest of us, it's a sobering reminder to take safety warnings seriously, especially in places where nature isn't meant to be tamed. A tragic and shocking incident went down at a safari park in South Africa when a lioness attacked and killed 29-year-old Catherine Chappell, a talented editor who had worked on Game of Thrones. The horrifying attack happened at Lion Park, about 30 kilometers north of Johannesburg, on a Monday in 2015. Catherine, an adventurous traveler from the US, was on a safari tour with friends when things took a devastating turn. Out of nowhere, a lioness lunged through an open car window and started mauling her. Scott Simpson, the park's assistant manager, described the terrifying moment, confirming that the big cat wasted no time in launching its attack. Another person in the car, believed to be the tour guide, was also injured but survived after receiving medical treatment. The incident immediately sparked concerns about safety at the park, especially since there were clear warnings instructing visitors to keep their windows rolled up while driving through the lion enclosure. It's a simple rule meant to protect people, but sadly, it wasn't followed in this case, and the consequences were devastating. Catherine Chappell was a rising star in the entertainment industry, having worked as an editor in Game of Thrones. She helped shape the Emmy-winning episode The Children in 2014, playing a key role in the show's gripping storytelling and jaw-dropping visuals. Her sudden and tragic death left the entertainment world in shock, with fans and colleagues mourning the loss of someone so talented and full of promise. After the attack, Lion Park, a popular tourist attraction known for its big cat enclosures and up-close safari experiences, shut down temporarily as authorities investigated what happened. The tragedy served as a harsh reminder that no matter how incredible these animals are, they are still wild creatures and can be unpredictable. Visitors were once again urged to take safety rules seriously to prevent another disaster. Beyond just this one incident, Catherine's death sparked a bigger conversation about the risks of wildlife tourism and the fine line between humans and captive animals. Safari parks give people the rare chance to see these majestic predators up close, but that experience comes with real dangers. No matter how used to humans these animals might seem, their instincts never disappear. If they feel provoked or even just act on impulse, the results can be deadly. This heartbreaking incident left many people reflecting on how fragile life is and why respecting nature's power is so important. Catherine's death, though tragic, is a grim reminder that wild animals are just that, wild. No matter how controlled or safe an environment seems, nature doesn't follow human rules. As the investigation continued, her death became part of a larger discussion about wildlife conservation and the risks that come with human-animal interaction. But while her life was cut short far too soon, Catherine's legacy lives on, especially in the Game of Thrones community, where her work helped create some of the show's most unforgettable moments. Her talent and passion for storytelling continue to inspire those in the film and TV industry, and her memory will always be cherished by those who knew and loved her. Timothy Treadwell, better known as the Grizzly Man, was obsessed with bears, so much so that he spent years living among them in the wild. But that deep fascination ended in the most horrifying way possible when he and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenot, were killed by a grizzly. The chilling details of their final moments were even caught on an audio recording, painting a terrifying picture of their last minutes alive. Timothy's love for grizzlies started when he was a kid. He grew up taking camping trips to Alaska with his family, getting up close to these massive animals. Over time, that fascination turned into an obsession. Every summer, he packed up and headed to Alaska's Conemaugh National Park, where he lived among the bears and even protect them from poachers and harm. That belief drove him to keep coming back despite the obvious risks. In 2003, Amy joined him for what would unknowingly be their final trip. They were supposed to fly home on a seaplane, but just hours before their scheduled departure, disaster struck. A bear attacked their campsite, and the horrifying encounter was all caught on tape. The camera lens cap was on, so there was no video, but the audio captured the chaos. The recording starts with Amy's nervous voice asking if the bear is still outside. Then Timothy's panicked screams fill the air. "Get out here. I'm getting killed out here." You can hear the sound of the tent zipper as Amy rushes outside, yelling for him to play dead, hoping it'll make the bear lose interest. But things spiral out of control. Timothy's agonizing screams continue as the bear lets go of them for a moment, only to come back with more force. Amy, armed with nothing but a frying pan, tries to fight the bear off. She screams at Timothy to fight back, hitting the bear with everything she has. The desperate struggle, the chaos, the pure terror, it's all there, captured in those last moments before the tape cuts off. The next morning, their pilot, Willie Fulton, arrived to pick them up, but instead of seeing Timothy and Amy waiting by the shore like usual, there was silence. Then he spotted something that sent chills down his spine, a massive, aggressive bear standing over what looked like a pile of human remains. When park rangers arrived, they found a gruesome scene. The tent was destroyed, their gear was scattered, and eerily, their snacks were left untouched. Among the remains, they found a severed arm, fingers, and Timothy's head. The bear had partially buried some of those remains in a pile of grass and mud, a behavior predators use to store food for later. Timothy's death sparked huge debates. Some argued that his reckless behavior put both himself and Amy in danger. By ignoring safety rules and getting too close to wild animals, he crossed a line, one that ultimately cost him his life. Others, though, admired his passion and dedication, even if they thought he took it too far. This tragic story is a brutal reminder of nature's raw power. While Timothy loved grizzlies with all his heart, his death shows what happens when fascination turns into recklessness. Wild animals aren't pets or friends, they're exactly that, wild. And no matter how much we admire them, they can never truly be tamed. Though Timothy wanted to protect these animals and educate the world about them, his and Amy's deaths serve as a haunting lesson. The final audio recording captures the terrifying reality of what happens when humans forget the boundaries between themselves and the wild. It's a chilling, unforgettable story, one that will always remind us to respect the power of nature. The ocean has always been a place of mystery, beautiful, vast, and unpredictable. But in 2016, its unforgiving nature was tragically proven when 28-year-old Lance Appleby lost his life while surfing at Granite Beach on the Arab Peninsula. What started as a peaceful evening on the water quickly turned into a nightmare, one that ended with Lance being taken by the very ocean he loved. It was Thursday, January 7th, and Lance, a Port Lincoln local, was out catching waves, soaking up the summer sun like he had so many times before. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. As he paddled back after riding a wave, disaster struck. A massive shark attacked him out of nowhere, giving him no time to react. Jeff Schuer, a family friend who witnessed the attack, later recalled the horrifying moment. Nearby surfers watched in shock as Lance disappeared beneath the water. His surfboard, later found floating nearby, had a deep bite mark, proof of the sheer force of the attack. Even more chilling, the board's rope had been severed, leaving no doubt that the shark's strike had been swift and brutal. Emergency services were called immediately, and as the sun set, the search for Lance began. But as the hours dragged on, reality set in. He was gone. His body was never recovered, leaving the entire community in grief and disbelief. News of the attack spread fast, and for the people of Port Lincoln, the loss felt deeply personal. Lance wasn't just another surfer, he was part of their town, a familiar face, someone who lived for the ocean. Lance had been in the area visiting family for Christmas, enjoying the waves he had grown up riding. He had just started an apprenticeship as a carpenter. Full of hope for the future, his sudden and violent death left a hole that could never be filled. Granite Beach, known for its rugged beauty and powerful waves, also has a dark reputation for shark attacks. While this wasn't the first tragedy in the area, it was one that struck a nerve. In the days that followed, conversations about shark safety and ocean awareness resurfaced. The ocean, as breathtaking as it is, holds dangers that can turn deadly in an instant. For the people of Port Lincoln, Lance's death was a painful reminder of the risks that come with living so close to the sea. Surfing, like any adventure, comes with its dangers, but no one ever expects to be the one who doesn't make it back to shore. Though Lance's life was cut tragically short, his memory lives on in the waters he loved. His friends, family, and hometown will always remember him as the guy who felt at home in the waves. And while his story is a heartbreaking reminder of nature's raw power, it also speaks to the untamed beauty of the sea, a place of wonder, but also a force that demands respect. In 2014, a horrifying incident at the New Delhi Zoo left visitors in shock and raised serious questions about human curiosity and its limits when it comes to wildlife. Maqsood Khan, a 22-year-old man, found himself face to face with a powerful predator, a moment of fascination that turned into a nightmare. His tragic fate, both chilling and unforgettable, was a brutal reminder of the dangers of crossing the line between humans and wild animals. The terrifying encounter took place inside the tiger enclosure, home to Vijay, a 7-year-old white tiger, one of an endangered species. That fateful day, Maqsood somehow ended up inside the moat of the enclosure, directly in the predator's path. Witnesses could only watch in stunned silence as he stood there, frozen, staring into the piercing eyes of the tiger. For nearly 15 agonizing minutes, Vijay observed Maqsood, seemingly unsure of his intentions. The crowd, paralyzed with fear, watched as the tense standoff unfolded. Some began shouting and throwing stones in an attempt to distract the tiger, but their actions only made matters worse. The already delicate situation escalated. Then, in a flash, the fragile balance was shattered. Vijay lunged. The tiger grabbed Maqsood by the neck, dragging him deeper into the enclosure. Screams erupted from the horrified crowd as they witnessed the brutal attack. Some onlookers described the gruesome sight of MYUU writhing in pain as the powerful animal mauled him. Chaos spread throughout the zoo as authorities scrambled to respond. Rescue efforts were complicated by VJ's natural instincts. The tiger, now in full control of its territory, refused to back down. It took zoo staff nearly 2 hours to lure the animal into a smaller holding cage before they could retrieve what was left of MYUU. By then, it was too late. His injuries were fatal. In the aftermath, the tragedy sparked a massive debate. Some reports suggested that MYUU had been mentally unwell, while others speculated whether he had deliberately entered the enclosure or had fallen in by accident. The incident also raised concerns about zoo safety, with many questioning why the barriers weren't strong enough to prevent such an event. Beyond security concerns, the attack reignited ethical discussions about keeping wild animals in captivity. Animal rights activists were quick to defend VJ, arguing that the tiger had simply acted on instinct. To the animal, MYUU was an intruder, another being trespassing in its domain. Was it really fair to blame the tiger for doing what comes naturally? Others argued that zoos, despite their educational purpose, could never truly replicate an animal's natural habitat, leading to unpredictable and tragic incidents like this one. Following the attack, the New Delhi Zoo took steps to reinforce safety measures, adding strong barriers and increasing surveillance. But no amount of security changes could erase the memory of what had happened. For those who were there that day, MYUU's story remains a haunting reminder of the fine line between curiosity and catastrophe. Wild animals, no matter how majestic, are not meant to be approached or underestimated. This tragic event left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it, a lesson in respect for the raw, untamed power of nature. In a horrifying and tragic incident, a tourist visiting the picturesque Swat Valley in northwest Pakistan was dragged from a police station and brutally lynched by a mob, leaving the nation and the global community in shock. The man, accused of desecrating the Quran, Islam's holy book, suffered a fate that underscored the lethal power of mob violence when fueled by accusations of blasphemy. A tranquil town turns into a scene of horror. The incident unfolded in Mingora, a serene summer retreat in Swat, renowned for its lush landscapes and tranquil beauty. But the peace was shattered when allegations of blasphemy ignited fury among locals. News of the accusation spread rapidly, drawing a large and enraged crowd to the scene. Local police initially intervened, rescuing the accused and placing him in protective custody, but their efforts were short-lived. The mob, incited by fiery rhetoric, reportedly broadcast from a nearby mosque, grew more determined. As tensions escalated, the police were overwhelmed, unable to contain the swelling crowd. Forced to retreat, they left the accused defenseless. Seizing the opportunity, the mob stormed the police station, dragged the man into the streets, and brutally beat him to death. A shocking display of collective rage. What followed was even more harrowing. Video footage captured on mobile phones showed the man's lifeless body paraded through the streets, a grotesque display of mob fury and vengeance. But the violence did not end there. In a final act of pure horror, the mob set his body ablaze, turning an already tragic event into a ghastly spectacle. The footage spread like wildfire across social media, sparking outrage and condemnation throughout Pakistan. Authorities scrambled to restore order. Authorities later confirmed that 11 people were injured, including 8 police officers who had tried to hold back the raging crowd. Malanan Division's regional police chief, Muhammad Ali Gandapur, pointed fingers at a local mosque, accusing it of inciting violence and calling on people to demand vengeance. The crowd, which reportedly included individuals as young as 13, was whipped into a frenzy by relentless propaganda and religious rhetoric. Efforts by the police to clear the streets and restore order proved futile as chaos raged through the night. As the dust settled, the full scale of the tragedy became painfully clear. Local authorities have since launched an extensive investigation, registering cases against hundreds of individuals believed to have taken part in the lynching. Additional security forces have been deployed to prevent further unrest, but the damage is done. Swat Valley, once a beloved tourist destination, now finds itself deserted. Hotels that once bustled with visitors now stand empty. As frightened tourists scramble to leave, the lynching has cast a long shadow over the town, turning a place of natural beauty into the site of a grim cautionary tale. This horrifying lynching is not an isolated event. Blasphemy accusations in Pakistan have long been a flashpoint for mob violence, often leading to deadly consequences. The country's blasphemy laws, first introduced under British colonial rule and made punishable by death in the 1980s, have become a weapon of extremist elements. Accusations often bypass legal due process, turning mere allegations into instant death sentences, without evidence, without trial. In another recent case, a Christian man was fatally attacked after being accused of burning pages of the Quran. His death added to the grim tally of victims who had fallen prey to vigilante justice fueled by religious zeal. The aftermath of this latest tragedy has left Pakistan deeply divided. On one hand, there is widespread outrage, with many condemning the mob's actions as a barbaric and shameful affront to humanity. On the other, fear persists. Speaking out against such violence is dangerous, as even questioning these acts can lead to being labeled a blasphemer, a potentially fatal accusation in itself. For now, Mingora remains a town shrouded in grief and fear. Its streets are haunted by the echoes of a tragedy that should never have happened. The beauty of Swat Valley has been overshadowed by the brutality of its darkest hour, a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked mob violence in the name of religion. Sharm el-Sheikh, a paradise along Egypt's Red Sea coast, has long been a haven for divers and snorkelers. With vibrant corals and thousands of exotic fish, it's a dream destination. But in December 2010, that dream turned into a nightmare. One moment, the waters were a pristine blue. The next, they ran red with blood. Nina Jinsky, 46, from Wigan, England, had just emerged from snorkeling when she heard the screams. Frantic shouts in Russian echoed through the air. Shark! Shark! Chaos erupted. Tourists sprinted from the water in terror. Among them was Nina's husband, Jarek, who had been swimming when the predator struck. Beachgoers scrambled for safety, some clawing their way onto a jetty. But for one man, escape came too late. Muhammad Rashad, a barman at a nearby restaurant, watched in horror as a bloodied victim staggered out of the water, leaving a gruesome trail behind him. Then, just minutes later, the shark struck again. A rescue diver pulled another victim from the water, his hand barely attached, hanging by a sliver of skin. In just 2 days, the same predator attacked 5 people, 4 Russians and a Ukrainian, leaving them with horrific wounds. Some had limbs severed, others had their backs torn open. The culprit, an oceanic white-tipped shark, a species known for its bold, aggressive nature. Egyptian authorities responded swiftly, closing beaches and deploying conservation teams. By the end of the week, 2 sharks were caught and examined for evidence of human remains, but the damage was done. Sharm el-Sheikh's once thriving beaches emptied. Tourists packed their bags, vowing never to return. The once inviting Red Sea now seemed ominous, a reminder that paradise can turn deadly in an instant. Statistically, shark attacks are rare. In the US, the odds of being attacked by a shark are 1 in 11.5 million. The chances of a fatal attack, less than 1 in 264 million. But for those who lived through the Sharm el-Sheikh attacks, statistics mean nothing. The ocean, so full of beauty and wonder, will forever carry the shadow of an ancient predator. A family's dream vacation to the magical world at Disney turned into an unimaginable nightmare, forever staining what was meant to be a time of joy and wonder. The happiest place on earth became the backdrop for a tragedy so devastating that it left an unshakable mark on all who witnessed it. It was a warm Tuesday evening at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort, where families gathered along the sandy shores of the Seven Seas Lagoon. The night air was filled with the sounds of fireworks bursting over the nearby Magic Kingdom, a movie playing in the background, and the carefree laughter of children soaking in the magic of Disney. Among them was 2-year-old Lane Graves. the youngest of his family from Elkhorn, Nebraska. He played at the water's edge, his tiny feet sinking into the soft sand, his world one of innocence and delight. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A sudden splash broke through the hum of the evening. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, perhaps just a fish breaching the surface, but in the next heartbeat, terror struck. The splash wasn't harmless. It was an alligator, and it had lain. Before anyone could react, the massive reptile emerged from the murky water, its powerful jaws clamping down on the little boy. His father lunged forward without hesitation, throwing himself into the lagoon, his hands clawing at the alligator. Desperate to wrestle his son free, he fought with every ounce of strength, driven by pure instinct. But the beast's grip was unrelenting, its primal power unstoppable. Within seconds, it dragged Lane beneath the water, vanishing into the darkness. Panic spread like wildfire. People who had been laughing moments earlier now stood frozen in horror. Shouts for help filled the air. Emergency calls were made. Within minutes, search teams arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie reflections on the lagoon's still surface. The once lively shoreline transformed into a staging sound for a frantic rescue effort. Sonar technology was deployed. Divers combed the waters. Officials scoured the area, hoping against hope for a miracle. But as the hours stretched into the night, optimism dimmed, and by the following afternoon, the worst fears were confirmed. After an exhaustive 16-hour search, divers found Lane's lifeless body just feet from where he had been taken. He was intact, untouched, aside from the marks left by the alligator's fateful grip. The creature itself had disappeared into the depths, slipping away as silently as it had come. What had begun as a joyful family trip had turned into a horror beyond comprehension. The Graves family, who had arrived at Disney only days earlier, now faced the loss no words could ever describe. The tragedy cast a shadow over the resort, over Disney, and beyond. The world was left reeling. How could something like this happen in a place designed to be safe, in a setting so carefully controlled? Questions swirled. Why weren't there clearer warnings? How had an alligator been able to lurk undetected so close to guests? Signs prohibited swimming, but none explicitly warned about alligators. An oversight now under intense scrutiny. But in Florida, alligators are an ever-present reality. They wait beneath the surface, unseen until it's too late. Lane's death sent shockwaves across the nation, sparking urgent discussions about wildlife safety and human recreation. But for his grieving family, no policy change, no safety measure, no new warning sign could ever undo the unbearable loss. They had come seeking magic and wonder, only to leave carrying the heaviest sorrow a parent could bear. As the fireworks continued lighting up the night sky over the Magic Kingdom, one thing was certain: no one would ever forget the little boy lost in the water, and no one could ignore how quickly joy can be shattered by the silent, lurking dangers of the natural world. Backpacking through Southeast Asia is often seen as a rite of passage, a journey filled with adventure, discovery, and stories to last a lifetime. For two young travelers, Holly Brisley and Bianca Jones, their trip to Laos was supposed to be just that, an unforgettable experience. But what began as an ordinary stop at a popular hostel in Vang Vieng soon turned into a nightmare, one that would leave a lasting scar on the backpacking community. Nestled in the heart of Vang Vieng, Nano Backpackers was the kind of place where young travelers from around the world gathered to celebrate freedom and exploration. Music pulsed through the air, drinks flowed endlessly, and the atmosphere was electric with the energy of wanderers eager to lose themselves in the moment. On the night of November 9, 2019, the carefree energy masked a danger no one could have predicted. Among the travelers that night was Lily, a British backpacker soaking in the lively scene. When the hostel's bartender, a charismatic man named Tone, offered her 2 free vodka shots, she accepted them without hesitation. It was a routine exchange, something that had likely happened countless times before at the bustling hotel bar. But soon after taking the drinks, something felt off. At first it was just a creeping nausea, but it quickly spiraled into something much worse. Her vision blurred, her body convulsed, and waves of violent illness overtook her. Within moments, she was completely disoriented, plunged into terrifying darkness as her heart rate skyrocketed. Terror gripped her as she fought to stay conscious, unable to understand what was happening to her. While Lily was battling this sudden and overwhelming sickness, two other travelers at the hostel were facing the same horror. Holly and Bianca, both just 19 years old, had unknowingly consumed the same mysterious poison. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Holly's condition worsened rapidly, and she was rushed to a hospital in Thailand in hopes that advanced medical care could save her, but nothing could reverse the damage. She passed away within days, her family left shattered by the sudden and senseless loss. Bianca's fate was just as grim. Not long after Holly, she too succumbed to the mysterious poisoning. Her loved ones left grieving for a life cut tragically short. As news of their deaths spread, questions began to swirl. The focus of the investigation turned to Tone, the bartender who had served them drinks. When questioned, he maintained his innocence, insisting that the vodka had come straight from the factory, untouched and untainted. In a dramatic move to prove his claim, he poured himself a shot from the same bottle and drank it in front of the investigators. His actions suggested that he believed the drinks were safe, but for Holly, Bianca, and Lily, the consequences had been devastating. The once lively hostel became a place of mourning, the air thick with grief and fear. Travelers packed their bags and left, shaken by what had unfolded. Across the backpacking community, the tragedy sent shockwaves. The allure of Southeast Asia, the stunning landscapes, the wild parties, the endless adventure, suddenly seemed far more dangerous than before. Tales of counterfeit alcohol had long been whispered among seasoned travelers, but now those fears had been confirmed in the most harrowing way possible. For Holly and Bianca's families, the grief was accompanied by an unbearable question. How could something like this happen? How could two vibrant, adventurous young women lose their lives so suddenly, all because of a few drinks in what was supposed to be a safe and welcoming space? For Lily, who had narrowly survived, the experience was a grim reminder of how quickly adventure can turn to peril. Though the investigation into the hostel continued, the damage had already been done. The deaths of Holly and Bianca, along with Lily's near-fatal encounter, remained a haunting, cautionary tale for travelers everywhere. Beneath the surface of carefree adventures lay dangers that were often insane, lurking in the most unexpected places, and sometimes the greatest threats were the ones no one ever saw coming. Yellowstone National Park is a place where beauty and danger coexist. A land of breathtaking thermal pools, geysers, and steaming hot springs that hint at the volatile forces beneath the Earth's surface. For 23-year-old Colin Scott, a recent college graduate from Portland, Oregon, a visit to this extraordinary park should have been a thrilling adventure. But on June 7, 2016, his curiosity led him down a path of no return, turning what should have been an unforgettable experience into a devastating tragedy. Colin had come to visit his sister Sable, who lived nearby, and together they set out to explore Yellowstone. Their journey took them to Norris Geyser Basin, an area famous for its vibrant geothermal features and unpredictable terrain. All around them, warning signs reminded visitors to stay on the boardwalks, paths specifically designed to keep people safe from the park's fragile ground and deadly hot springs. But despite these warnings, Colin and Sable were drawn to the allure of something forbidden. With Sable recording their adventure on her phone, the siblings ventured into a restricted area. Reports later suggested they were looking for a spot to hotpot, a dangerous and illegal activity where people attempt to soak in the park's thermal pods. Though the steaming waters may appear inviting, they are far from safe. Heated by underground volcanic activity, these pools can reach scalding temperatures and contain highly acidic chemicals capable of dissolving organic material. As they wandered farther from the boardwalk, disaster struck. Colin slipped and fell into one of the boiling springs. In an instant, he was swallowed by the scalding acidic water. Just steps away, Sable could do nothing but watch in horror as her brother disappeared beneath the surface. The tragedy unfolded so quickly and mercilessly that there was no time for rescue. Frantic, Sable called for help, and park rangers rushed to the scene, but the conditions in the Norris Geyser Basin were too treacherous to attempt an immediate recovery. The unstable ground, extreme heat, and an incoming lightning storm forced them to retreat. When they returned the next day, Colin's body was gone, completely dissolved by the corrosive waters. A report from the National Park Service later detailed the heartbreaking series of events. The deputy chief ranger explained that Colin and Sable had deliberately left the safety of the boardwalk in search of a thermal pool, a decision that ultimately cost Colin his life. Sable later recounted that her brother had been visiting her to celebrate his recent college graduation, and their trip to Yellowstone was meant to be a highlight of their time together. The Norris Geyser Basin is one of the most active thermal areas in Yellowstone, with water temperatures often exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. These geothermal wonders may look serene, but they are anything but. The acidic waters and extreme heat make them incredibly dangerous, a reality tragically underscored by Colin's accident. Yellowstone's geothermal features are shaped by the powerful volcanic forces beneath the Earth's crust, making the park as deadly as it is beautiful. For those who knew Colin, the loss was immeasurable. What should have been a joyous celebration of his achievements became a devastating lesson in the unforgiving nature of the wild. His story serves as a reminder that the beauty of Yellowstone comes with immense power that must be respected. Even a single step off the designated path could have catastrophic consequences. Colin's tragic death lingers as both a warning and a sobering lesson. Yellowstone is a place where nature's raw forces are on full display, breathtaking, mysterious, and utterly unforgiving. For all its wonder, it demands respect, reminding us that behind its grandeur lies a perilous and unstoppable force. What started as a lighthearted moment quickly spiraled into a harrowing tragedy when a Chinese businessman's fascination with a 1.5-ton walrus led to a fatal encounter. Jianjun Lian, an ardent admirer of the walrus house at a zoo in Liaoning Province, China, often shared his enthusiasm with friends and family. He would send them photos and videos of the colossal marine mammal, marveling at its sheer size and strength, with messages like, "So strong, so big." Yet his deep admiration took a devastating turn during an ill-fated visit to the zoo. Driven by his affection for the walrus, Lian decided to get closer than he ever had before. Ignoring the barriers meant to protect both visitors and the animals, he entered the gated enclosure, determined to snap a selfie. With a selfie stick in hand, he approached the massive female walrus, unaware of the danger lurking beneath her seemingly gentle demeanor. In a tragic and unexpected twist, the walrus suddenly grabbed him from behind. Her enormous flippers wrapped around his body in a grip far stronger than any human could resist. In an instant, she dragged Lian into the enclosure's pool, the weight and force of her movements overpowering him completely. A zookeeper who had cared for the walrus since she was a calf immediately sprang into action. He knew the animal well, trusted her temperament, and had spent years understanding her behaviors. Without hesitation, he dove into the water in a desperate attempt to save Lian, but the walrus, seemingly mistaking the struggle for play, pulled the zookeeper under as well. The scene turned grim as the reality of the situation became clear. Both men were no match for the walrus's sheer strength. The struggle ended in tragedy as they were overpowered and drowned beneath the weight of the massive creature. What made the event even more heart-wrenching was the likely innocence of the walrus's intentions. Reports suggested that she was not acting out of aggression, but rather engaging in what she perceived as playful behavior. To her, the struggle may have seemed like an affectionate hug, not a life-threatening encounter. The incident serves as a tragic reminder of the unpredictable risks in close interactions with wild animals, even those accustomed to human care. Surveillance footage from the zoo captured the entire ordeal, and when the video surfaced on Chinese social media, it quickly went viral. The chilling images underscore the immense power of these marine mammals, the devastating consequences that can arise when humans overstep boundaries in wildlife settings. The footage showed the walrus's movements beginning slowly, almost gently, before escalating into a chaotic and ultimately fatal struggle. Lian's tragic demise became a somber warning about the dangers of underestimating wild animals. What began as an innocent attempt to capture a moment of connection ended in unimaginable loss. The death of the zookeeper, meanwhile, highlighted the deep bond and sense of duty caretakers feel toward the animals they raise, a devotion that can sometimes place them in perilous situations. Despite being at the center of the tragedy, the walrus remained unharmed and reportedly returned to her normal routines. Experts and animal behaviorists weighed in on the incident, emphasizing that even animals raised in captivity retain their natural instincts. Their sheer size and strength make them inherently dangerous, even in the absence of malice. The incident sparked widespread discussions online and within wildlife conservation circles. Many questioned the responsibilities of both zoos and visitors, calling for stricter safety measures to prevent similar accidents in the future. Some argued that better education on the risks of human-wildlife interaction could help prevent such tragedies. For Leanne's family and the loved ones of the zookeeper, however, no policy change could undo their loss. What began as an attempt to capture a special moment ended in heartbreak, leaving behind a haunting lesson. In the presence of wild animals, even the most innocent interaction can turn deadly. In the early hours of a stormy morning on Mount Warning in northern New South Wales, Australia, a tragic turn of events shattered the dreams of two young adventurers. Sam Bay, a 24-year-old American backpacker from New York, lost his life in a freak lightning strike that illuminated the summit where he and his girlfriend, Michelle Sela, had pitched their tent. The couple had set out on what was meant to be a year-long journey across Australia, a time to explore the vast landscapes in their camper van, soaking in the freedom of the open road. They had arrived 8 weeks earlier, filled with excitement for the adventures ahead. But on that fateful Tuesday, all of their plans were struck down by the raw and merciless power of nature. As the dead of night gave way to a violent thunderstorm, the sky above Mount Warning roared with flashes of electric fury. A bolt of lightning tore through the clouds, striking a towering tree directly above their tent. The energy surged downward in an instant, claiming Sam's life. Just inches away, Michelle survived the blast, but the force left her with head and neck injuries. Dazed and disoriented, she was left to grapple with the horrifying realization of what had just happened. The sound of thunder faded, replaced by Michelle's desperate cries. Her voice carried through the storm, eventually reaching the ears of two nearby hikers. The strangers, now unwitting rescuers, rushed toward the scene, finding Michelle in shock and Sam unresponsive. They did everything they could, administering CPR for over an hour in the relentless downpour, but the lightning had been merciless. Sam had died instantly, his life extinguished in a blinding flash that no one could have foreseen. Emergency services were called, and a team of 25 rescue workers braved the treacherous conditions to retrieve Sam's body from the mountain summit. The descent was arduous, taking nearly 2 hours as they navigated the rugged terrain and pouring rain. Meanwhile, Michelle was taken to Murwillumbah Base Hospital, where she began the unimaginable task of processing the loss of her partner. Mount Warning, known as Wallumbin to the indigenous Bundjalung people, rises 1,150 meters into the sky, drawing hikers eager to witness its breathtaking views. But beneath its beauty lies an unpredictable danger. Camping at the summit is strictly prohibited, and climbers are strongly advised to avoid the peak during thunderstorms. Yet in the spirit of adventure, those warnings were set aside, a decision that cost Sam his life. His untimely death was a cruel reminder of nature's unpredictability, its ability to shift from awe-inspiring to deadly in the blink of an eye. What began as a night of wonder under the stars ended in heartbreak, leaving Michelle to navigate the painful reality of a journey that had been tragically cut short. Mount Warning, a place of inspiration and grandeur, had become the setting for unimaginable sorrow. For those who venture into the wilderness, Sam's story stands as a solemn reminder that while nature's beauty is undeniable, its dangers are just as real. The wild does not bend to human desires, nor does it offer mercy when its power is unleashed. The tragic case of Mackenzie Mikowski, a 31-year-old American tourist, has left her family and friends reeling as they struggle to comprehend the shocking loss of their loved one. Mackenzie, a neurosurgery nurse practitioner from Portland, Oregon, had set out on what was supposed to be a joyful vacation in Budapest, Hungary, a city she lovingly called her happy place. But in early November, her life was brutally cut short in a chilling sequence of events that had since shaken both her community and international travelers. Mackenzie was last seen on November 5th at a popular nightclub in central Budapest. When she failed to return home or make contact, a frantic search ensued, with family, friends, and Hungarian authorities rallying to find her. Security footage soon revealed she had been in the company of a man, later identified as 37-year-old LTM, an Irish citizen who would become the prime suspect. Their movements were tracked across multiple clubs that night, leading investigators to a grim conclusion. On November 7th, authorities apprehended the suspect, and during questioning, he confessed to the killing. However, his statements only deepened the mystery as investigators worked to unravel the exact details of what had transpired. According to Hungarian police, Mackenzie and the suspect left the nightclub together and went to his rented apartment, where the night took a deadly turn. The suspect claimed her death was accidental during an intimate encounter. Though the exact cause remains under investigation, what happened next sent shockwaves through the investigation. Instead of seeking help, the suspect reportedly went to great lengths to conceal the crime. He cleaned the apartment, hid Mackenzie's body in a wardrobe overnight, and the next day, he purchased a suitcase, placed her remains inside, and rented a car. He then drove roughly 90 miles southwest of the serene shores of Lake Valenci, where he abandoned the suitcase in a wooded area near the town of Székesfehérvár. The chilling nature of the crime became even more apparent when authorities uncovered disturbing evidence, including the suspect's internet search history. Investigators revealed he had searched for ways to dispose of a body, police protocols for handling missing persons cases, and perhaps most disturbingly, whether wild boars could consume human remains. He even researched the capabilities of Budapest's police force, a clear indication of premeditation. When authorities recovered the suitcase, they also found several of Mackenzie's personal belongings, her fleece-lined boots, a handbag, and a credit card bearing her name. These haunting remnants painted a heartbreaking picture of a vibrant young woman whose life was brutally stolen. Mackenzie's murder has not only devastated her loved ones, but also cast a dark shadow over Budapest, a city cherished by tourists for its rich history and bustling nightlife. Hotels, clubs, and local businesses are grappling with the fallout as the case sends waves of fear through both residents and visitors. As the suspect remains in custody, the lingering questions about Mackenzie's final moments and the senseless violence that ended her life continue to weigh heavily. Her story serves as a harrowing reminder that danger can lurk even in the places we hold dear. As her family seeks justice and closure, they remember Mackenzie as a bright, compassionate woman whose dreams were tragically stolen, her memory now forever intertwined with the city that once brought her so much joy. For many, the allure of Bali lies in its natural wonders, its pristine beaches, lush jungles, and towering volcanoes. Mount Batur, with its striking silhouette and mesmerizing sunrises, has long been a favorite for hikers and thrill seekers. But the death of this young traveler serves as a sobering lesson. Even in the most beautiful places, danger is never far away. As news of the accident spread, local authorities urged hikers to exercise extreme caution, reminding visitors that while Mount Batur is a popular tourist destination, it remains an active volcano with unpredictable terrain. Guides familiar with the mountain's dangers stress the importance of staying on marked paths, wearing proper hiking gear, and being mindful of the ever-changing conditions. For the victim's grieving family, the trip to Bali was meant to be a dream adventure, a chance to experience a new culture. Instead, they are left with unimaginable heartbreak and the painful reality that one wrong step can change everything. Even in the wake of tragedy, Mount Batur continues to draw adventurers from all over the world, a testament to its irresistible charm. But now, in the whispers of the wind that rushes through its jagged cliffs and the shifting mist that blankets its slopes, there lingers a haunting reminder: nature, for all its splendor, is never to be underestimated. What started as a moment of thrill-seeking turned deadly when 32-year-old Spaniard David Gonzalez Lopez lost his life after being gored by a bull while trying to take a selfie during a bull run in Villaseca de la Sagra. The tragic incident happened in the early hours of Sunday, leaving onlookers in shock as Lopez suffered severe injuries that proved fatal. Lopez, eager to capture the intensity of the event, turned his back on the charging bulls, focusing on his phone screen instead of the chaos around him. He didn't see one bull break away from the herd heading straight for him. In a horrifying moment, the bull gored him in the neck and thigh, tossing him into the air as stunned spectators watched in disbelief. A video of the incident, now widely circulated online, shows the chilling sequence of events. Lopez had left the safety of the protected area and stepped into the center of the arena to film the action. He was recording as two bulls collided, leaving one seemingly unconscious. But in a split second, a third bull spotted him, charged at full speed, and struck him from behind, lifting him off the ground with its powerful horns. Emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, but despite their efforts, he didn't make it. Villaseca de la Sagra, like many Spanish towns, hosts an annual bull running festival, a tradition that draws both participants and spectators from all over. The adrenaline-fueled spectacle, where crowds run ahead of bulls released onto the streets or into arenas, has always been controversial. Animal rights activists argue that the practice is cruel and unnecessarily stressful for the bulls, while critics also point out the dangers to human participants, with injuries and fatalities occurring nearly every year. Lopez's death adds another tragic chapter to the long-debated history of these festivals. A resident of a nearby town, he had come to the event with friends, likely wanting to capture the excitement on his phone, never realizing the deadly consequences. The tragedy has reignited discussions about the dangers of prioritizing digital documentation over personal safety. Experts have repeatedly warned about the risks of selfie culture, where people get so focused on capturing the perfect shot that they ignore their surroundings, even in life-threatening situations. Lopez's death is a harsh reminder of how quickly moments of excitement can turn into tragedy. While bull running remains deeply embedded in Spanish culture, events like this continue to fuel calls for reform or even outright bans. Advocates argue that it's time to replace these risky and controversial traditions with safer, more humane celebrations. For now, the town of Villaseca de la Sagra mourns the loss of a young life, cut short in the chaos of its storied festival. The tragedy leaves a lasting impact on those who witnessed it, underscoring the real dangers of a tradition where human and beasts collide in an arena of raw unpredictability. What should have been a night of excitement ended in heartbreak, reminding us all that in the pursuit of thrills or spectacle, safety should never be overlooked. In August 2011, French tourists Cassandre Bouvier, 29, and Ura Mumni, 23, set off on a hiking adventure in Argentina's Quebrada de San Lorenzo, a nature preserve near Salta, in the northern part of the country. What was supposed to be an exciting journey into nature turned into a nightmare, as the two women never returned. After 2 weeks of uncertainty, authorities made a grim discovery. Their bodies were found, revealing the horrific fate they had suffered. Both women had been brutally attacked, raped, and ultimately shot to death. While the case did not receive much coverage in English-language media, it sparked intense reactions in both Argentina and France, igniting debates on tourist safety, violence against women, and law enforcement in remote areas. As the investigation unfolded, authorities arrested 7 potential suspects. The case quickly gained high-profile attention, and a dramatic reenactment of the crime was conducted the following year to piece together the sequence of events. The trial that followed was one of the most extensive in Argentina's recent history, with over 200 witnesses testifying as the court sought justice for the victims. For Cassandre Bouvier's family, the tragedy was unbearable. Her father, in an emotional interview with the Buenos Aires Herald, described the pain of seeing his daughter's lifeless body in the morgue. Yet despite his devastation, he did not hold resentment toward Argentina as a whole. He acknowledged that Cassandra was aware of the risks of traveling, but had still chosen to explore the beauty of the country. His perspective was one of understanding, choosing not to blame an entire nation for the acts of a few. The brutality of the murders sent shockwaves through Argentina and France, sparking public outrage and a demand for justice. It also raised concerns about the safety of tourists in remote locations and the effectiveness of law enforcement in securing such areas. Even years later, the case remains a painful reminder of the dangers that can lurk even in the most breathtaking landscapes, as well as a source of grief and reflection in both countries. Few criminals have managed to evade justice as skillfully as Charles Sobrach, a notorious serial killer who earned multiple chilling nicknames including the Serpent, the Bikini Killer, and the Proofreader. These names reflected both his slippery ability to escape authorities and the calculated nature of his crimes. One referred to the bikini left behind by one of his victims, while another was linked to his eerie habit of meticulously reviewing the details of his killings, almost as if he were proofreading his own work. Between the mid-1970s and early 1980s, Sabraj preyed on Western tourists traveling along the infamous hippie trail across Asia. His modus operandi was chilling. He would drug, rob, and murder his victims in cold blood. He had no single method of killing, but was known for some particularly gruesome murders, including drowning a woman in a bathtub. His calm and calculated approach made him even more terrifying, and his international crime spree led to a massive global manhunt. In 1986, he was finally arrested and placed in Indian custody, but his story didn't end there. In a shocking turn of events, he managed to escape from prison by orchestrating an elaborate scheme, proving once again why he was called the Serpent. But what was even more astonishing was his long-term strategy. He actually ensured that he would serve a longer sentence in India, knowing that this would protect him from the death penalty in Thailand, where some of his most heinous crimes had been committed. His ability to outthink the authorities solidified his infamous status. Despite his escape, Sabraj was recaptured and eventually released in 1997, but rather than keeping a low profile, he capitalized on his notoriety, charging for interviews and public appearances, effectively turning himself into a true crime celebrity. His overconfidence, however, would be his downfall. In 2003, while still a wanted man in multiple countries, he made the mistake of traveling to Nepal. A sharp-eyed journalist recognized him, leading to his arrest and conviction for murder in Nepal, where he was sentenced to life in prison. Even as he aged behind bars, Sabraj remained a self-styled mastermind, believing that one day he would walk free once again. His story remains one of the most infamous cases in criminal history, a chilling example of how intelligence and ruthlessness can allow a killer to evade justice for decades, leaving a trail of horror and unanswered questions in his wake. Michael and Thelma King weren't just tourists looking for a quick getaway in St. Martin. They had made the island their second home. Originally from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, just outside Charleston, they were in their 50s and had spent years building a successful restaurant business. But their love for St. Martin went beyond vacationing. They bought a condo, got involved in the community, and even started working on their own rum distillery. They were all in. By all accounts, they were well liked, respected, and genuinely part of the local fabric. But in September 2012, their dream life on the island took a horrific turn. That night, 3 young men who had just finished robbing a Chinese restaurant decided to hit the King's home next. This wasn't some random break-in. These guys were calculated, prepared, and ruthless. They forced their way in, tied up Michael and Thelma, and then, in an act of pure brutality, slashed their throats, leaving them to die in their own house. After stealing $80,000 in cash and jewelry, the killers fled. But what makes this even more disturbing is what they did next. Instead of laying low, they took some of the stolen money and went to a brothel to party, acting like they hadn't just destroyed 2 innocent lives. It was a level of cold-heartedness that sent chills through the entire island. Word of the murder spread like wildfire, rocking both St. Martin and the King's hometown in South Carolina. For the locals, this wasn't just another crime. It was deeply personal. The Kings weren't just visitors passing through. They had become part of the island's community. Their deaths shattered the sense of safety many had taken for granted. Authorities wasted no time hunting down the killers. When they were caught, the justice system didn't hold back. The ringleader got life in prison, while his 2 accomplices were sentenced to 22 and 28 years. During the trial, Judge Tamara Tuis didn't mince words. She called out the sheer cruelty of the crime, making it clear that the impact of the senseless act would be felt for years. For the King's friends and family, the loss was devastating. Michael and Thelma weren't just a successful couple, they were dreamers, adventurers, and generous souls who lived to the fullest. Their love for St. Martin was obvious in everything they did, from their investments in the island to the relationships they built with its people. Back home in South Carolina, they were remembered as pillars of the community, the kind of people who made an impact wherever they went. Losing them was heartbreaking, but knowing how brutally they were taken made it even worse. And in St. Martin, their deaths left behind a lingering sense of unease. If something this horrific could happen to them, what did that say about the safety of the island? Even though their murders remain one of St. Martin's darkest moments, The memory of Michael and Thelma King still lives on. Their story serves as a stark reminder of how life can change in an instant, even in the most beautiful, peaceful places. And while their family and friends are left to grieve and pick up the pieces, they also hold on to the legacy Michael and Thelma left behind, one of adventure, kindness, and an unshakable love for life. Sarah Cusack, 29 years old and 5 months pregnant, had just arrived in Puerto Rico for what should have been the happiest time of her life, her wedding. She was beyond excited, ready to marry the love of her life and start a family. That morning in February 2009, she set out for a jog near the city of Fajardo, taking in the warm island breeze and stunning scenery, completely unaware that her life was about to come to a violent, heartbreaking end. Out of nowhere, Eleazar Marquez, now a 36-year-old man, appeared and snatched her right off the street. He forced her into the trunk of his car, her screams going unheard. But even in her most terrifying moment, Sarah did something incredible. She managed to call her fiancé from inside the trunk. Her voice was shaken but clear, and her words would haunt him forever. "I'm going to die." She also described the car, trying to give police enough information to find her before it was too late. That desperate call turned out to be a crucial clue. Authorities triangulated her phone signal and tracked it back to Marquez, who had already been in their radar. Police acted fast, catching him before he could get any further. When they pulled him from the car, he was covered in blood, but the worst had already happened. Just an hour after Sarah's call, they found her lifeless body. She had been brutally murdered, her throat slashed in a horrific, senseless attack. The news shattered her fiancé. One minute he was waiting for her to come back from a morning jog, and the next he was being told he'd never see her again. When Marquez was questioned, he confessed. He admitted to kidnapping, assaulting, and killing Sarah, but he couldn't even explain why. He claimed he didn't know she was pregnant, but that hardly mattered. The crime was completely random. No motive, no reason, just pure unexplainable cruelty. In court, Marquez was convicted of kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder, and sentenced to a staggering 105 years in prison. But even with justice served, it still felt like nothing could ever truly make up for what happened. Sarah had been a loving daughter, a devoted fiancé, and an excited mother-to-be, all ripped away in an instant. For her fiancé, the pain was unbearable. He kept replaying her final words, trying to make sense of the unthinkable. One moment they were planning a future together, and the next, she was gone forever. Even years later, the case still leaves so many unanswered questions. Why her? Why that day? Why so much violence for no reason at all? Sarah's murder is a chilling reminder of how life can change in a second. One minute you're living in your dream, and the next, you're a victim of unimaginable cruelty. And for those who loved her, the pain of losing her will never truly fade, because some losses just can't be healed. Cary Stayner's childhood was marked by unimaginable trauma. His younger brother Stephen was abducted and held captive for 7 years, a case that shocked the nation. It was later turned into a TV movie, I Know My First Name is Stephen. But just after the film aired, tragedy struck again. At only 24 years old, Stephen died in a motorcycle accident, a heartbreaking end after everything he had been through. Most people who experience tragedy don't go on to become killers, but Cary Stayner was different. He later admitted that he had fantasized about killing since he was just 7 years old, and as he got older, those dark thoughts become reality, turning him into one of the most infamous murderers in modern American history. Stayner's first plan was to kill his girlfriend and her daughters, but when the moment came, he couldn't go through with it. Instead, his twisted focus shifted to strangers, tourists visiting the Yosemite National Park area where he lived and worked. At the time, Stayner was employed at the Cedar Lodge, a motel just outside Yosemite, and was very familiar with the area, having spent much of his childhood camping in the park. His victims were 42-year-old Carol Sun, her 15-year-old daughter Julie, and 16-year-old exchange student Silvina Palazzo from Argentina. Stayner lured them in and carried out the murders with chilling precision. Carol and Silvina were killed in their motel room, then stuffed into the trunk of the rental car, which Stayner set on fire to destroy evidence. Julie's body was found discarded elsewhere, but what made his crimes even more disturbing was his arrogance. Stayner taunted investigators by sending a letter to the FBI, which included a map showing where Julie's body was dumped, along with a sickening message, "We had fun with this one." As if that wasn't enough, he intentionally dropped Carol's son's wallet 80 miles away in Modesto, trying to confuse police and throw them off his trail. Despite committing 3 brutal murders, Stainer went back to work at Cedar Lodge like nothing had happened. No one suspected a thing, but his bloodlust hadn't faded. It only grew stronger. In July 1999, he struck again. His next victim was 26-year-old Joy Armstrong, a naturalist working for Yosemite Institute. She lived alone in a secluded cabin, making her an easy target. Stainer attacked her with uncontrollable rage, ultimately decapitating her. But this time, he made a mistake. A witness saw it struck near Joy's cabin, giving authorities their first real lead. As investigators closed in, Stainer was finally arrested. He confessed in shocking detail, describing his horrific crimes with no remorse. The community and the entire nation was left stunned. Stainer was convicted of all 4 murders and sentenced to death. Today, he remains in California's death row, serving a sentence that reflects the pure horror of what he did. His story is one of violence, loss, and a deeply broken mind. While his past was tragic, it doesn't excuse the monstrous crimes he committed. In the end, his case is a terrifying reminder that some people, no matter what they've been through, can sink into darkness in ways we'll never fully understand. 17-year-old Mike Mansell was an adventurous teenager who thrived on excitement. Whether paddling through the rough waters on the Yukon River with his father or embarking on solo trips, he was always in search of a thrill. So when he traveled to Malta in the summer of 2016, it was meant to be another step toward independence. His first vacation alone, no parents, no family, just him, his rented bike, and his GoPro to document the experience. His girlfriend was also in Malta for a language course, and they spent a few enjoyable days together before she returned to Germany. But Mike wasn't finished exploring. Equipped with his great backpack, a few €100, a power bank, a straw hat, and his GoPro, he was determined to make the most of his trip. On the morning of July 18, 2016, he sent his father a voice message on WhatsApp, talking about the sleep roads and promising to send a picture soon. Then he set off on his bike, but that picture never arrived. As time passed, concern grew. Mike didn't return his rented bike, and by July 22, he had missed his flight home to Germany. Alarmed, his family reported him missing, triggering a frantic search. 8 days later, on July 26, his body was discovered at the base of Dingley Cliffs, a 29-meter, 95-foot drop about the height of an 11-story building. His bike was hanging from a bush above, while his sunglasses and shoes were scattered nearby. But something was missing. His backpack, GoPro, and other belongings vanished. Authorities quickly ruled it an accident, stating that Mike had fallen. His father, Bernd Mansell, was taken to the scene and told that Mike had suffered 2 broken vertebrae. The grief was overwhelming, but at least the family thought they had answers. However, when Bernd visited the morgue to confirm the details of his son's fall, he was met with a disturbing revelation. There were no fractures on Mike's body. Even stranger, the rented bike, supposedly involved in a high-impact fall, had only minor damage: a flat tire, a slightly misaligned seat. Then came the most shocking discovery. When Mike's body was returned to Germany for a second autopsy, most of his organs were missing. Only his left kidney, diaphragm, spleen, and large intestine remained. His body weighed a mere 32 kilograms, 70 pounds, and despite Maltese authorities claiming he had been embalmed, German specialists found no evidence of it. Bizarrely, there were no signs of rodent activity or natural decomposition that could explain the missing organs. The inconsistencies kept piling up, and with each revelation, more questions arose. Yet Maltese authorities remained firm in their conclusion. Mike had simply fallen. They dismissed suspicions, suggesting that a tourist might have stolen his belongings. It wasn't until April 2018, nearly 2 years later, that Bernd was finally granted access to the full case file. Despite the glaring contradictions, the official explanation remained unchanged. German prosecutors speculated the trees could have softened Mike's fall, possibly explaining the lack of severe injuries, but this still didn't account for his missing organs or the conflicting reports. Determined to find the truth, Bernd continued his relentless search for answers, returning to Malta repeatedly. In 2021, he even pursued legal action, requesting a European investigation order to push for further examination. Yet to this day, the mystery remains. What really happened to Mike Mansell? Let me know what you think. In the summer of 2017, 22-year-old Bakari Anderson was ready to celebrate a major milestone. Freshly graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in finance and entrepreneurship, he was on the verge of launching his own clothing brand. But before stepping into the business world, he wanted one last adventure, a chance to enjoy life before adulthood fully set in. Zakynthos, Greece, with its breathtaking beaches, hidden cliff diving spots, and lively nightlife, was the perfect destination for a carefree trip with his friends. From the moment they arrived, Bakari and his group embraced every moment, spending their days exploring, cliff jumping, and soaking up the sun. He was the heart of the group, the kind of person who always had a smile on his face, uplifted those around him, and made every situation more enjoyable. Traveling meant more to him than just having fun. As a young black man in America, he often faced unspoken challenges, but abroad, he felt a unique sense of freedom, like he could just be himself without the weight of societal expectations. One night, after another exhilarating day, Bakari and his friends decided to check out Leganes, the island's renowned party district. Known for its vibrant clubs and international crowd, the area was buzzing with excitement. At one of the clubs, a Serbian waitress invited them inside, and Bakari struck up a friendly conversation with her. They even took a quick selfie together, an innocent moment that should have meant nothing. But to a nearby Serbian man, it was unacceptable. His expression darkened with anger at the sight of a black man speaking to her. His hostility escalated quickly. He began yelling, drawing the attention of others. Soon, more men, mostly Serbians along with a Greek and a British citizen, joined in. The situation turned violent in an instant. One of them threw a punch, then another, and suddenly, Bakari was surrounded, trying to fight off multiple attackers. Realizing he was badly outnumbered, he tried to escape, sprinting out of the club, but they chased him down. Security footage captured the horrifying moment when nearly 10 men surrounded Bakari in the street, attacking him mercilessly. They punched and kicked his head repeatedly, not giving him a chance to defend himself. By the time his friends reached him, it was too late. He had been beaten to death. The attack led to 9 men being identified and put on trial, but justice proved elusive. In 2018, none of them were convicted of murder. Instead, 6 received lesser charges of deadly assault, while 3 walked free. The verdict was a crushing blow for Bakari's family. Even a Greek prosecutor recognized the injustice and called for a retrial, something possible in Greece, where double jeopardy laws don't apply as they do in the US. The case even gained international attention, with Kamala Harris raising concerns in discussions with Greece's prime minister. Despite this, the retrial faced delay after delay. By 2022, nothing had changed. 5 of the convicted men had already been released, and the last one was soon to follow. For Bakari's loved ones, the fight for justice continues, but the painful questions remain. How could such a brutal act take place, and how did those responsible walk away with so little consequence? In November 2014, 23-year-old Sylvia Rachel was finally experiencing the moment she had dreamed of for years. Born and raised in Lublin, Poland, she had always been captivated by Spain, not just as a tourist destination, but as a place she deeply admired. She had dedicated years to studying the language, envisioning the day she could explore its streets and immerse herself in its vibrant culture. That day had arrived. Seville, the heart of Andalusia, was everything she had imagined: charming, full of life, and steeped in history. But for Sylvia, this wasn't just a vacation. As a medical student on an Erasmus scholarship at the University of Almeria, she had big aspirations. She planned to move to Spain permanently, pursuing a career as a nurse. This trip wasn't just a getaway, it was a first step toward building her future. With her long black hair, striking blue eyes, and a contagious smile, Sylvia was someone who embraced life to the fullest. She was adventurous, always eager to explore new places and create unforgettable memories. So when she arrived at the iconic Puente de Triana, one of Seville's most famous landmarks, she saw the perfect opportunity to capture a special moment. The 19th century metal bridge, known for its breathtaking views, was a hotspot for tourists. And like many visitors, Sylvia wanted the perfect photo. She climbed onto the metal ledge, carefully positioning herself for a stunning selfie. But in a devastating instant, everything went wrong. As she balanced on the edge, her foot suddenly slipped. Before she could react, she lost her footing and fell backward, plummeting 15 feet onto the concrete surface below. Horrified bystanders gasped and rushed to call for help. Paramedics arrived quickly, but the situation was critical. Sylvia had suffered a fractured skull and was already in cardiac arrest. Medics managed to revive her and rushed her to the hospital of traumatology, fighting desperately to save her life, but her injuries were too severe. Despite their efforts, Sylvia Rochel passed away, leaving behind shattered dreams and a grieving family. Her parents were devastated. Their daughter, so full of ambition and excitement for the future, had her life tragically cut short in the very place she had longed to visit. But Sylvia's story didn't just affect her loved ones. It left the city of Seville reflecting on safety. Her accident led local officials to reconsider pedestrian safety near popular tourist spots, especially areas where visitors often take risks for the perfect photo. Sylvia had finally made it to Spain, but at an unimaginable cost. Her story became a heartbreaking reminder of how a single moment can change everything. Kyle Barrow was the kind person who thrived on laughter and adventure, always the life of the party. The 27-year-old from Oldham, Manchester, was a friend everyone could count on for a good time. But despite his love for excitement, he never traveled outside the UK. He had talked about it for years, dreaming of packing a bag and heading somewhere new. But life always got in the way. Until one day, a spontaneous opportunity changed everything. His best friend of 10 years, Cal, suggested a last-minute getaway, and Kyle didn't hesitate. The destination? Turkey. Why Turkey? They weren't entirely sure. Maybe it was the beaches, the adventurous sports, or just the appeal of going somewhere unexpected. Whatever the reason, one thing was certain. They were ready to make the most of it. Jet skiing? Absolutely. Parasailing? Definitely. Laughing until their stomachs hurt? Guaranteed. This trip was about checking off bucket list experiences and creating stories they'd talk about for years. On June 6, 2023, Kyle and Cal landed in Turkey, filled with excitement. They headed straight to Manavgat, a place known for its breathtaking waterfalls and scenic landscapes. It was the perfect place for two friends looking for adventure. The next day, eager to explore like locals, they rented mopeds to cruise through town. It seemed like a fun idea at the time, except for one problem. Kyle had never ridden a moped before. No experience, no training, and most crucially, no helmet. But when you're on holiday, excitement often outweighs caution, and so they set off, feeling like kings of the road. For a while, everything was perfect. The wind of their hair, the open road ahead. Cal was having the time of his life. Cal, leading the way, glanced in his mirror and saw Kyle grinning behind him, completely in his element. But then, in a single moment, everything changed. Cal looked back again. Kyle was gone. Panic set in immediately. He had turned around, retracing their path, his heart pounding. Then he saw it. Kyle lying motionless in the road, blood pooling around him. The sight was something he would never forget. Just moments earlier, his best friend had been laughing, and now he was at the center of a nightmare. A truck had stopped nearby, leading Kyle to believe it was involved in the crash, but the details were unclear. Had Kyle lost control? Had he swerved to avoid something? The question raced through Kyle's mind as he ran to his friend, screaming for help. Cars passed by, but no one stopped. It was as if the world continued moving while his had come to a crashing halt. Then finally an ambulance arrived. But what happened next was beyond belief. A paramedic took one look at Kyle and drove away. Cal was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His best friend was lying there, gravely injured, and the medics just left. He was alone, helpless and desperate, holding on to Kyle, praying for another ambulance. 15 agonizing minutes later, a second ambulance arrived. This time, Kyle was rushed to the hospital. Doctors did everything they could, but his injuries were too severe. Cal, pacing the hospital hallways, had to make the most heart-wrenching call to Kyle's family, hoping for a miracle. But despite every effort, Kyle didn't survive. A post-mortem examination revealed multiple injuries, including a fractured spine. Local police claimed he had crashed into a palm tree, but Cal immediately doubted their explanation. Something didn't add up. The exact details of the crash remained unclear, and the lack of immediate medical attention only deepened the tragedy. Bringing Kyle home wasn't easy. His family, his girlfriend Hannah, and his friends had to crowdfund to cover the cost of flying his body back to the UK and arranging his funeral. The financial burden was heavy, but their love and determination were stronger. Tributes flooded in. Friends called him a legend, the guy who could make any moment unforgettable. Some even got tattoos in his honor, carrying his memory with them forever. Kyle's first trip abroad was meant to be a celebration of life, adventure, and laughter, Instead, it became a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life truly is. But one thing is certain, his story didn't end on that road in Turkey. His legacy lives on in the memories, the laughter, and the people who loved him most. For over a decade, Thailand's Koh Tao Island has been shrouded in mystery, earning chilling nicknames like Death Island and Murder Island due to a string of unexplained tourist deaths, at least 11 in total. Despite its dark reputation, 31-year-old Theo Bailey and his longtime girlfriend, Chantal Zeri, decided to take a trip there in March 2024. Whether they were unaware of the island's eerie past or simply unfazed by it, they seemed to be enjoying themselves until the unthinkable happened. The couple was last seen at a lively local bar, surrounded by a scene straight out of a tropical travel guide. Tourists laughing over oversized cocktails, some inhaling nitrous oxide known as hippie crack, and others dancing the night away. Everything seemed normal until suddenly Theo vanished. One moment, he was part of the festivities. The next, he was gone. No one could pinpoint exactly when he disappeared or whether he mentioned where he was going, but one thing was certain. As the night wore on and the music died down, Theo never returned. The search for him ended the next afternoon, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Instead of a hungover, embarrassed Theo stumbling back with a wild story to tell, his lifeless body was discovered in a shallow drainage ditch near the Octopus Diving Center by Sairi Beach. From the state of the scene, it was clear he had been there for hours, meaning he likely died while the party was still raging nearby. Even more unsettling, his phone was missing. Whether it was stolen or lost remains unknown. Authorities wasted no time launching an investigation, blocking off the area to preserve evidence while forensic teams examined the scene. Theo's body was transported to a hospital for an autopsy, but frustratingly, the results have yet to be released to the public. And then came the strangest part. Despite the suspicious circumstances, Koh Tao's police superintendent Lieutenant Colonel Chuchat Wech told reporters that no foul play was suspected. According to the official explanation, Theo simply wandered off, accidentally fell into a shallow waterway, and tragically lost his life. No signs of violence, no arrests, case closed. But not everyone was convinced. While authorities seemed satisfied with their conclusion, Chantal Zeri was left devastated. Heartbroken, she took to social media to share an emotional tribute, calling Theo her best friend, her angel, and the love of her life. She wrote that 10 years together would never be enough, promising to keep his memory alive forever. In her posts, she reminisced about their shared adventures and cherished moments, a heartbreaking reminder that her world had changed overnight. But beyond her grief, whispers of conspiracy spread through online forums and expat communities. Koh Tao has a murky past, full of unsolved deaths, suspicious disappearances, and allegations of cover-ups. Many believe that powerful local figures have a vested interest in protecting the island's booming tourism industry, ensuring that scandals don't make headlines. There have long been rumors that cases like Theo's are swept under the rug to avoid bad press. Was Theo's case another conveniently closed file, or was it really just an unfortunate accident? The island's shadowy legacy lives on. The truth about what really happened to Theo Bailey may never be known. Koh Tao's mysterious reputation remains intact, and for every unanswered question, there seems to be no clear answer. That despite its dark past, tourists continue to visit its sun-drenched beaches, some unaware of the island's eerie history, others choosing to ignore it, because in the end, perhaps some stories are meant to stay buried, just like the secrets of Death Island itself. On a moonlit summer night in 1967, the breathtaking wilderness of Glacier National Park revealed a terrifying reality, one that still lingers in the whispers of its forests and along its rugged trails. That night, two 19-year-old women, each on separate adventures beneath Montana's starlit sky, unknowingly stepped into a nightmare. Julie Helgeson and Michelle Coons would become victims of the park's most fearsome predators, grizzly bears. For decades, Glacier had been celebrated for its untamed beauty, its jagged peaks, dense forests, and endless trails, a haven for adventurers. But something had been brewing in the wilderness. For weeks, grizzlies had been appearing dangerously close to campsites, lured by food scraps left behind by careless visitors, and even hand-fed by thrill-seeking tourists. Back then, bear-proof trash cans didn't exist. Safety measures were minimal, and people had little understanding of how their actions could tip the delicate balance between humans and nature into chaos. For Julie Helgeson, the evening began peacefully. She and a friend set up camp in a quiet clearing, the kind of place where the stars felt close enough to touch. But as they slept, something massive stirred in the shadows. In the pre-dawn hours, a grizzly bear crept into their camp, sniffing at their sleeping bags. Frozen with fear, they lay still, hoping it would move on. It didn't. Without warning, the bear attacked, ripping through fabric and flesh with terrifying precision. Julie's screams shattered the silence as the grizzly dragged her into the darkness, her companion left behind, wounded, bleeding, and helpless. A search party was sent out, and hours later, they found Julie barely clinging alive, her body bearing horrific injuries from the attack. Rescuers did everything they could, but she succumbed to her wounds before the helicopter could even take off. Miles away, Michelle Coons and her group had their own terrifying encounter. Earlier that evening, a grizzly had raided their campsite, scavenging for food. Believing the danger had passed, they moved to a beach to sleep, but the wilderness is rarely so forgiving. At 4:30 a.m., the bear returned, this time with deadly intent. As the massive creature charged, panic erupted. Michelle's friends scrambled up trees, but she wasn't fast enough. The bear attacked with unimaginable ferocity, severing her arm and inflicting fatal wounds. By the time rescuers arrived, Michelle was gone. 2 women, 2 attacks, just hours apart. The horrifying coincidence sent shockwaves through the nation. Never before had Glacier National Park witnessed such brutal back-to-back bear attacks. The events were later chronicled in Jack Olson's Night of the Grizzlies, a haunting account that exposed the deadly consequences of human interference with wildlife. In the wake of the tragedy, Glacier National Park made sweeping changes. Bear-proof trash cans became mandatory. Feeding wildlife was strictly prohibited. Campsites with known bear activity were closed off. The scars of that night ran deeper than policy shifts. Even today, those who walk the trails near the attack sites speak of an unsettling stillness, as if the land itself remembers. Glacier's beauty remains undeniable, but beneath its breathtaking scenery lies a force untamed, a reminder that in the wild there are no guarantees. For Julie Helgeson and Michelle Coons, the cause of that truth was their own lives. The journey to the summit of Mount Everest begins in the relative calm of base camp, sitting at 17,700 feet, 5,400 meters. But as climbers ascend, the mountain gradually reveals its true unforgiving nature. Each camp along the route marks a deeper descent into danger, leading to the final trial, the death zone, stretching across the last 3,000 feet. The death zone is as ominous as its name suggests. Oxygen levels are critically low, temperatures plummet to lethal levels, and storms can appear without warning. Here, every step is an agonizing battle against survival, and the summit's lure can quickly become a death sentence. In early May 1996, a team from Adventure Consultants, a company that specialized in guiding climbers to Everest's peak, set out on an expedition that would become one of the deadliest in the mountain's history. The group included 11 clients, 3 company guides, and several Sherpas. Among them was Yasuko Namba, a determined 47-year-old climber who was striving to become the oldest Japanese woman to reach the summit and the second Japanese woman to conquer all 7 summits, the highest peaks on each continent. As the climbers made their way up the Lhotse Wall on May 8, disaster nearly struck when guide Andy Harris was hit in the chest by a boulder the size of a television. The impact was severe, but Harris refused to turn back, pushing forward with the team. On May 10 at midnight, the group left Camp 4 for their final push to the summit. However, their journey was plagued by delays and exhaustion. To avoid the dangers of descending in darkness, the climbers are advised to begin their descent by 2 p.m. But as fatigue set in, many in the group didn't reach the summit until well after the deadline, putting them in an increasingly dangerous situation. At 5 p.m., Everest unleashed its fury. A massive blizzard swept across the mountain, engulfing the climbers in blinding snow and hurricane-force winds. Visibility dropped to near zero, temperatures plummeted, and the climbers became trapped in the death zone. Rob Hall, a seasoned guide and co-founder of Adventure Consultants, stayed behind to assist Yasuko Namba, who was struggling to descend. As the storm intensified, Hall was able to contact his wife via satellite phone the following afternoon. His voice was weak from the cold, and his final words to her were heartbreaking. "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." It was the last message he would ever send. When rescuers finally reached the area, Hall, Namba, and Harris were dead, claimed by the brutal storm. Hall's frozen body remained on the mountain, a tragic symbol of his dedication to his climbers, while Harris's body was never recovered. The blizzard didn't just take their lives. 4 other climbers from a separate group also perished that day, their dreams of conquering Earth's highest peak ending in ice and silence. The 1996 blizzard became one of the worst tragedies in Everest's history, serving as a chilling reminder that even the most experienced climbers are at the mercy of the mountain. Everest is not just a challenge, it's a reckoning, a place where ambition collides with the raw power of nature, where the line between victory and tragedy is as thin as the air at its peak. May 18, 1980 started as an ordinary morning in southwestern Washington, if you ignore the rumbling volcano. For weeks, 48-year-old photographer Robert Landsberg had been camped near Mount St. Helens, patiently waiting. He wasn't there for the fresh mountain air. He was there for a story, one that geologists had been warning about for months. A massive eruption was coming. Armed with his camera and a gut feeling, he had positioned himself just 4 miles from the summit, far closer than most would dare. Since March, Mount St. Helens had been showing signs of unrest. Small earthquakes rattled the region. A massive bulge on the volcano's northeastern slope was expanding 5 feet a day. To scientists, photographers, and thrill seekers, it felt like a slow-motion countdown to chaos. But for Landsberg, it was an opportunity he couldn't walk away from. On the night of May 17, he set up camp once again, convinced that something big was coming. Dawn on May 18 came with an eerie calm. The volcano had been quiet for days, leading some to believe that the worst had passed. But Landsberg wasn't convinced. He parked near Sheep Canyon, just outside the restricted zone, preparing for another day of capturing Mount St. Helens' unpredictable beauty. Then at 8:32 a.m., the mountain proved everyone wrong. A 5.1 magnitude earthquake struck, shaking the ground violently. The entire northern face of the volcano collapsed in the largest landslide ever recorded. Moments later, a catastrophic lateral blast tore through the landscape. From miles away, it looked like the apocalypse had arrived early. For Landsberg, positioned directly in its path, the realization was immediate. There was no escape. With seconds left to live, Landsberg didn't run. He didn't panic. Instead, he did what he had come to do. He documented history. As the ash cloud raced toward him, he kept shooting, capturing the eruption frame by frame. But when it became undeniably clear that survival was impossible, he made one last extraordinary decision. He rewound the film, carefully sealed it in a protective canister, and placed it inside his backpack. Then, in an incredible act of foresight, he used his own body to shield it, knowing that his story would live on, even if he didn't. The pyroclastic flow, with temperatures reaching 800 degrees Fahrenheit, engulfed Landsberg in his car, taking his life instantly. For weeks, search teams combed the devastated landscape, looking for survivors in the ash-choked wasteland. It wasn't until June 4 that Landsberg's body was discovered, buried beneath layers of volcanic debris. But remarkably, his backpack and the film inside had survived. When developed, the photographs revealed a haunting sequence. The eruption unfolding in terrifying detail, the ash cloud growing larger and darker, swallowing the landscape, the unstoppable power of nature, captured in a series of final chilling images. Landsberg's photographs were later published in National Geographic, offering invaluable scientific insight into the eruption. But more than that, they became a testament to his courage and dedication. He didn't just document history, he ensured it would never be forgotten. His final act stands as a powerful reminder of nature's raw, unpredictable power and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to chase it. In the end, Robert Landsberg captured not only the eruption, but his own place in history. Exploring the ocean's depths has always been a delicate balance between human innovation and the unforgiving power of nature. In 1973, that balance tipped tragically when the Johnson Sea Link, a cutting-edge research submersible, descended off the coast of Key West, Florida. What was supposed to be a routine dive turned into a desperate fight for survival, one that cost 2 men their lives and left a lasting mark on deep-sea exploration. The mission had begun a year earlier, when the USS Fred T. Barry, a decommissioned destroyer, was deliberately sunk to create an artificial reef. By 1973, the site had flourished into a thriving marine habitat, drawing scientists eager to study its development. The Johnson Sea Link, designed for advanced underwater research, was dispatched to investigate. This high-tech submersible featured a unique block-out system, allowing scuba divers to exit and re-enter through its uninsulated aluminum aft compartment, while the pilot's cabin remained pressurized and dry. On board for this mission were Albert Stover and Edwin Link, the son of the submersible's creator, who occupied the aluminum section, dressed casually in shorts and shirts, expecting the dive to last no more than an hour. As the Johnson Sea Link descended toward the wreck of the Fred T. Barry, the tranquil waters of Key West hid a lurking danger. The submersible became ensnared in the wreck's tangled cables and debris. Trapped in a web of steel, every attempt to free it only tightened its grip, as if the shipwreck refused to let go. A slow-motion disaster unfolds. As time ticked by, the situation grew dire. The uninsulated aft compartment began to freeze, with the icy waters pressing in relentlessly. The air filtration system, meant to remove carbon dioxide, struggled to function in the bitter cold. The oxygen inside became heavy and toxic, turning each breath into a suffocating struggle. A terrifying question loomed: could Stover and Link escape? The only way out was a free ascent to the surface, 360 feet, 110 meters, up through freezing darkness and crushing pressure. It was a nearly impossible feat, one that would likely mean certain death. With no other option, they waited for rescue, hoping help would come before it was too late. Hours turned into a full day. Inside the insulated pilot's compartment, 2 other crew members were safe but powerless to help. Meanwhile, in the frigid aluminum chamber, Stover and Link's body slowly shut down, the toxic air tightening its grip as the cold seeped into their bones. By the time rescue teams finally freed the Johnson Sea Link, 24 hours later, it was too late. Stover and Link had succumbed to carbon dioxide poisoning, trapped in isolation and silence, lost to the depths they had set out to explore. The 2 survivors were safely retrieved, but the deaths of Stover and Link left an indelible mark on deep-sea exploration. The Johnson Sea Link was eventually repaired and returned to service, yet the haunting memory of that day lingers, a stark warning of the ocean's vast and merciless power. The Arctic is a land of raw beauty and brutal extremes, where the midnight sun casts an eerie glow over an endless expanse of ice and snow. In the summer of 2011, a group of British teenagers traveled to Svalbard, Norway, for what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. They sought breathtaking landscapes, camaraderie, and perhaps a glimpse of a polar bear in its natural habitat. Instead, their dream turned into a nightmare. Among the group was 17-year-old Horatio Chappell, an aspiring doctor with a bright future. He was one of 80 students on a month-long expedition organized by the British Schools Exploring Society, BSES. For the teenagers, this was more than a trip. It was a test of endurance in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. The risks of polar bear encounters were well known. Parents were assured that tripwires with small explosive charges would warn of approaching bears. Group leaders would be armed with rifles for protection. Pin flares would be issued to the students as a deterrent. But as the expedition pushed deeper into the Arctic, flaws in the safety measures became clear. There weren't enough pen flares to go around. Some trip wires failed to work properly. The group leader's rifle was old, unreliable, and handled by someone with limited training. On what should have been a quiet Arctic night, disaster struck. A starving polar bear, driven by desperation, crept into the camp undetected. The vast silent tundra gave no warning until it was too late. The bear tore into Horatio's tent with terrifying force, its massive claws ripping through the fabric. Screams pierced the night as the predator lunged at the sleeping teenagers. One boy was bitten on the head, but the worst was yet to come. The bear dragged Horatio from his tent. Despite the desperate attempts of group leaders to fend off the attack, their malfunctioning rifle failed to fire in time. Horatio never stood a chance. As the struggle continued, 4 others were seriously injured before the bear was finally shot and killed, but the damage had been done. What began as a journey of exploration had turned into a nightmare of survival. Horatio Chabel, a young man full of promise and ambition, had his life cruelly cut short in the unforgiving Arctic wilderness. Investigations into the attack revealed a series of failures: faulty tripwires that failed to detect the bear, insufficient safety precautions for such a dangerous environment, an inadequate weapon handled by an inexperienced leader. For Horatio's grieving parents, no explanation could bring their son back. Survivors carried the invisible scars of that night, haunted by the growls of the predator, the chaos, and the friend they couldn't save. Even today, the Arctic carries the weight of that tragedy. Some see it as a harsh reminder of nature's indifference, a place where the line between beauty and brutality is razor thin. For others, it stands as a warning. In the wild, where humans are merely visitors, complacency can turn awe into disaster in an instant. It was a peaceful Friday evening on March 31st, 2023, in McCormick's Creek State Park in Owen County, Indiana. The park, surrounded by towering trees and gentle breezes, was the perfect escape for Brett and Wendy Kincaid, a couple from Rossville, Indiana who had built a life around love, faith, and the outdoors. For 26 years of marriage, they had been inseparable, partners in life, adventure, and faith. Brett, 53, was a skilled contractor, known for his hard work and dependability. Wendy, 47, worked at Purdue University, beloved by her colleagues and friends. Together, they were pillars of their community, active in their church and devoted to their children and grandchildren. McCormick's Creek was their sanctuary, a place to unwind, reconnect, and embrace the beauty of nature. But that evening, nature had different plans. As the evening unfolded, dark clouds gathered above the park. What had been a calm retreat suddenly turned ominous. The first warning came as strong, gusty winds swept through, soon followed by blaring sirens, urging campers to seek shelter immediately. Many rushed to the cement bathhouse, knowing it was the safest option. Brett and Wendy, however, stayed in their camper, perhaps thinking the storm would pass quickly, or not realizing the sheer force of what was coming. They had no way of knowing that a powerful tornado was about to rip through the park, with winds reaching 138 miles per hour. When the tornado touched down, it unleashed chaos. Trees were ripped from the ground. Campers were flipped over like toys. The once serene park was turned into a disaster zone. Rescue teams immediately began searching through the devastation, but the damage was so severe that emergency responders struggled to make their way through the wreckage. Throughout the night, they worked tirelessly, flashlights cutting through the darkness, combing through fallen trees, twisted metal, and shattered debris in search of survivors. Most campers who had taken shelter in the bathhouse emerged with only minor injuries, but Brett and Wendy were missing. It wasn't until Saturday morning that search crews made the heartbreaking discovery. Among the mangled remains of their camper, they found Brett and Wendy's bodies. The storm had taken them, leaving behind a community in shock and mourning. News of their passing spread quickly, and an outpouring of grief and tributes followed. Andrew Bean, a close family friend, described them as humble, kind, and inspiring, a couple whose love and faith touched everyone they met. They were known for their generosity, unwavering faith, and dedication to their community. The tornado that took Brett and Wendy's lives was part of a larger storm system that devastated multiple states, with a death toll of at least 32 people. In Indiana, 5 lives were lost, including theirs. As McCormick's Creek began the long journey of recovery, the Kincaid family leaned on their faith to carry them through their grief. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to help cover funeral expenses, and their church honored their memory, remembering the countless lives they had touched through mentorship, Bible classes, and acts of kindness. Brett and Wendy's story is a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability, how life can change in an instant. But their legacy is not one of loss, but of love, faith, and generosity. Though the storm took them too soon, their impact will live on in their family, their community, and the many lives they touched. Their story will not be forgotten. It was a clear, starry night in January 2022 at Lost Dutchman State Park, a breathtaking spot about 40 miles east of Phoenix, Arizona, nestled in the rugged Superstition Mountains. The park is a haven for thrill seekers, with its flat iron summit standing as the ultimate challenge. The towering peak offers breathtaking views and equally deadly risks. Among the adventurers that night was 21-year-old Richard Jacobson, a Mesa local with a deep love for the outdoors. He and a friend had set out on a camping trip, determined to conquer the Flatiron summit. Their hike was anything but easy. Steep trails, loose rocks, and narrow ledges made it as nerve-wracking as it was rewarding. But when they finally reached the summit, exhaustion melted away. Below them, the city lights sparkled like a sea of stars, contrasting against the vast wilderness that surrounded them. They pitched their tent, breathing in the crisp mountain air, unaware that disaster was just moments away. A misstep in the darkness. At around 12:45 a.m., Richard decided to capture the beauty of the city lights from the summit. Armed with his phone and flashlight, he ventured near the cliff's edge, while his friend stayed back at camp. The summit was pitch dark, the terrain treacherous, but Richard pressed on, eager to get the perfect shot. Then, in an instant, everything changed. In the dim glow of his flashlight, Richard miscalculated his footing. One slip was all it took. He lost his balance on the uneven rock and plunged 700 feet into the darkness below. His friend, startled by the sudden sound of the fall, immediately called 911. But navigating Flatiron Summit at night was dangerous for rescuers, just as it had been for Richard. Hours later, as dawn broke, search teams finally located Richard's body far below the summit. The Pinal County Sheriff's Office and the Arizona Department of Public Safety confirmed the devastating news. Richard had died instantly. There were no signs of foul play or intoxication, just a tragic accident that left his family and friends shattered. Richard was remembered as kind, adventurous, and full of life. He had a deep appreciation for nature's beauty and a natural ability to connect with others. Andrew Thomas, who had traveled with Richard on a mission trip in 2020, described him as someone who could bring people together effortlessly. His family and friends, though devastated, found some comfort in knowing he died doing what he loved most, exploring the great outdoors. His father, Richard Jacobson Sr., shared a heartfelt message online, inviting others to celebrate his son's life and cherish the memories he left behind. Flatiron Summit is notoriously dangerous, even for seasoned hikers. Accessible via the Siphon Draw Trail, it features steep, rocky paths that require absolute focus and caution. Warning about its risks fill online reviews, urging visitors to tread carefully, especially near the summit's edge. Sadly, Richard's fall was not an isolated incident. A 2018 study found that between 2011 and 2017, at least 259 people worldwide died while attempting selfies, with falls being a leading cause. Experts like Brandon Torres of Grand Canyon Emergency Services constantly warned against risky stunts in extreme environments. Sometimes, a fake fall for a photo becomes tragically real. Richard's story is a poignant reminder of the duality in nature, its breathtaking beauty and unforgiving danger. What started as a moment of wonder turned into heartbreaking loss, emphasizing the importance of safety in the pursuit of adventure. His love for the wild will never be forgotten, but neither should the lesson his story leaves behind. Thanks for watching. Stay vigilant, friends.